The morning my brother handed me a revised lease agreement for the house I grew up in, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just folded the paper in half, set it on the kitchen counter, and said I'd look it over. That was the moment I knew exactly what I was going to do. But let me back up, because none of this makes sense without knowing what the 3 years before that morning looked like. My dad had his first stroke when I was 28. I was working as a bookkeeper for a mid-sized logistics company, renting a one-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from my parents' house. My brother lived 45 minutes away in a nicer part of town, in a house he bought with the money my parents loaned him right after his wedding. A loan he'd never paid back, and then my parents never mentioned again. Because that's just how it was with him. My dad's name was Gerald. Everyone called him Jerry. He was stubborn, funny, and terrible at asking for help. When the stroke took most of the movement on his left side, he spent the first 2 weeks pretending it hadn't happened. He'd reach for his coffee mug and miss it and just sit there like he'd meant to do that. My mother had passed 4 years earlier. Breast cancer, fast and brutal. After she was gone, my dad rattled around that house alone until I started coming by twice a week to do groceries, bills, yard work. My brother called on Sundays, sometimes. After the stroke, twice a week became 5 days a week. Then it became every day. Then it became me subletting my apartment and moving into my old bedroom because the home health aide we'd hired kept not showing up, and my dad wouldn't eat if nobody put the food in front of him. My brother came by twice during those first 3 months. Once for dinner, once for what he called a family check-in that lasted 40 minutes and ended with him saying the house might need to go on the market eventually just to cover care costs. And we should probably think about that. My dad was sitting right there when he said it. I didn't say anything. I just cleared the plates. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that 6 weeks after the stroke, my brother had gone to my dad and gotten him to sign a power of attorney. He told my dad it was just a precaution, in case things got worse, in case decisions needed to be made quickly. My dad, who trusted him, who'd always trusted him, signed it. My dad never told me. I think he was embarrassed. Or maybe he thought it didn't matter, because nothing bad was going to happen. Here's what I knew for certain. I was the one changing his wound dressings at 11 at night. I was the one calling the insurance company on hold for 2 hours to fight a denied claim. I was the one who learned how to adjust his wheelchair and which sleeping position kept his shoulder from locking up. I knew the name of every medication he took and what time he took it and what it was for. My brother knew the Wi-Fi password because I'd texted it to him one Sunday. My dad passed on a Wednesday in October, peacefully, in his own bedroom, which was the only thing he'd ever asked for. I was there. My brother drove up 2 hours later. The funeral was small. My dad had outlived most of his friends. I handled everything. The arrangements, the obituary, the reception. My brother gave the eulogy. He cried. People told him he'd clearly been so devoted. I smiled and thanked them for coming. 3 weeks after the funeral, my brother called and said we needed to talk about the estate. He'd already spoken to an attorney, he said. There were some things to work out. The house had been in my parents' name jointly, then my dad's name alone after my mother passed. No trust. No updated will since 2009. My dad had told me once, sitting at the kitchen table over coffee, clearly and directly, that he wanted the house to go to me, because I'd been there. He said he'd take care of it. I believed him. He hadn't taken care of it. The 2009 will split everything equally between me and my brother. I won't pretend I wasn't devastated. I'd spent 3 years of my life in that house. I'd given up my apartment, slowed down my career, missed friends' weddings and birthday trips, spent my savings on things insurance wouldn't cover. And now the house, my dad's house, the house I was still living in, was going to be split down the middle. I told my brother I understood, and I'd need some time to think. What I actually did was sit at my dad's old desk and start going through his files. My dad kept everything. Paper bank statements going back 15 years. Receipts in manila envelopes sorted by year. A ledger he'd kept by hand tracking household expenses in his small, careful handwriting. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just needed to feel like I was doing something. I found the first irregularity on a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after the funeral. A withdrawal from my dad's checking account. $12,000 transferred to an account I didn't recognize. The memo line said, home repair, roof consultation. I was the one who'd arranged the roof inspection the previous spring. I had the invoice. It was $280. I kept looking. Over the next 10 days, I found 9 more transfers. Some small, some not. They'd started 4 months after my brother got the power of attorney and continued, sporadically, for almost 2 years. The amounts varied. $3,000 here, $8,500 there. One for $21,000 that the memo described as long-term care planning. My dad had never mentioned any of this, because my dad hadn't known. I made copies of everything. I organized it in a spreadsheet, dates, amounts, destination account numbers, memo descriptions. Then I cross-referenced it against the actual expenses I had receipts for from those same periods. The math was not complicated. Someone had moved approximately $67,000 out of my father's accounts over 22 months while he was incapacitated and unable to independently verify his own finances. I sat with that spreadsheet for 3 days before I did anything. I want to be honest about what I was feeling. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was something colder, a kind of clarity. I'd spent 3 years being the quiet one, the one who just handled things, the one nobody worried about because I never made any noise. And the whole time, someone had been counting on exactly that. I called a CPA I'd worked with professionally, a woman named Doris, sharp and no-nonsense who I trusted completely. I told her I needed help understanding some financial activity in an estate I was trying to sort out. I didn't tell her my theory. I just showed her the documents. She called me back the next morning. She said she needed to ask me directly, was I prepared for what this might turn into? I told her I'd been prepared for a while. Doris connected me with an attorney who specialized in estate litigation and elder financial abuse. His name was Raymond. He wore short-sleeved dress shirts and drank his coffee black and did not waste words. He reviewed everything I'd given him, asked me about 40 questions I hadn't thought to ask myself, and then told me we had enough to file a complaint with the state's Adult Protective Services and to challenge the estate distribution in probate court. He also told me to stop communicating with my brother about the estate through text and phone. From now on, everything in writing, everything through him. The day I got that advice was the same day my brother texted me asking if I'd had a chance to look at the market analysis he'd sent. He wanted to list the house by spring. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, he called. I let it go to voicemail. He said he was concerned about me, that he knew grief was hard, that we needed to work together on this, that it wasn't healthy for me to be living in Dad's house indefinitely. I saved the voicemail. Raymond filed the probate challenge and the APS complaint within the same week. My brother's attorney, and yes, he already had one, which I noted, immediately responded that all transactions had been authorized and documented and that I was acting out of grief and misunderstanding. Raymond said that was exactly what he expected them to say. Here's what I want to tell you about the month between filing and the estate hearing. I kept living in the house. I kept going to work. I cooked dinner and I called my friends and I took walks. And I did not tell a single person outside of Raymond and Doris what was happening because I had learned, 3 years earlier, watching my brother give that eulogy, that some things you protect by not announcing them. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5. I made coffee. I ironed the blouse I'd set out the night before. I drove to the courthouse, parked, and sat in my car for a few minutes. On my way from the parking garage to the building, I passed a man sitting on a bench near the courthouse steps. He was maybe 70. White-haired, wearing a heavy coat despite it being a mild morning. He had a rolling cart with him, stuffed with what looked like files and folders. He was trying to get the cart over a crack in the pavement and it kept catching. I stopped and helped him lift it over. He thanked me. We got to talking. He asked why I was at the courthouse so early. I told him I had a hearing. He said he did too, actually, just an old matter he was helping to resolve for a former colleague. We walked to the entrance together. He held the door for me. Inside, the security line was long. We ended up standing near each other. He asked what kind of hearing, and I gave him the short version, state dispute, financial misconduct, brother. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they've heard variations of a story many times. He said, the ones who wait the longest to make a move usually win, the patient ones. I said, I've been patient for 3 years. He smiled at that. We went through security and walked down separate hallways. I didn't think about him again until later. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. My brother was already there with his attorney, a man in an expensive suit who had the look of someone who charged by the syllable. My brother caught my eye when I walked in and gave me a look I can only describe as pity. which told me everything I needed to know about how confident he was. Raymond was calm. He is always calm. That used to unsettle me. Now I find it genuinely comforting. The estate attorney handling the proceeding called the session to order. My brother's attorney opened by characterizing the challenge as the product of grief and sibling rivalry, a predictable response from someone who'd made personal sacrifices and felt entitled to additional compensation. He used the word entitled deliberately. I noticed. Raymond noticed. We discussed that they would probably use that word. Then Raymond laid out the financial documentation. Transaction by transaction, account number by account number. He had a binder for the court, a binder for the opposing counsel, a binder for the record. He did not editorialize. He just read the numbers. My brother's attorney objected twice. The third time he tried, the estate attorney handling the proceeding held up a hand and said, quietly, "Let him finish." When Raymond finished, there was a pause. My brother leaned over to his attorney and whispered something. His attorney's expression, which had been carefully neutral, shifted, just slightly, just enough that I saw it. Then the door opened. I don't know exactly what I'd expected. I hadn't known there was going to be anyone else. Raymond hadn't told me. I found out later it was because he wasn't certain until that morning. The man who walked in was the man from the bench outside the courthouse. The one with the rolling cart. He had the cart with him still. He moved slowly but deliberately and took a seat to the left of the room, near the front. My brother's attorney said, "Who is this?" Raymond said, "This is Walter Okafor. He's a former senior investigator with the state's Financial Crimes Division, now working as an independent forensic consultant. He reviewed the documentation in this case at the request of the Adult Protective Services Office." My brother made a sound I can't really describe. It wasn't quite a word. Walter Okafor unlatched his cart, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the desk in front of him. He looked across the room. He looked at me. He didn't smile exactly, but there was something in his expression. Recognition, maybe. He said simply, "I've reviewed the records. I'd like to walk through what I found." What he had found, what he then laid out, calmly and methodically, over the next 40 minutes. Was this? The destination account that had received most of the transfers had been opened under a business name that was registered to my brother 2 years before my father's stroke. The home repair and long-term care planning memos did not correspond to any actual vendors or services. 3 of the transfers had occurred on days when my father was, according to his own medical records, in the hospital. He could not have authorized them. My brother's attorney asked for a recess. The estate attorney said, "We'll take 15 minutes. During those 15 minutes, I sat in the hallway on a wooden bench and drank water from a paper cup and did not think about anything in particular. Raymond sat beside me. He said, "You did well in there." I said I hadn't said anything. He said, "Exactly." When we went back in, my brother's attorney announced that his client wished to discuss a resolution. I want to tell you what my brother's face looked like in that moment, but I'm not sure I have the right words. He'd walked in that morning looking like someone who'd already won. Now, he looked like someone trying to remember which story he'd told to which person. Raymond said that we were open to discussion, but that any resolution would need to address the full value of the documented transfers, interest included, before any estate distribution conversation could begin. My brother's attorney said that was an aggressive opening position. Raymond said he thought it was a reasonable one, given the documentation. It took 6 more weeks to reach the final agreement. I won't walk you through every detail because honestly, some of it is still a blur. Calls with Raymond, documents to sign, numbers going back and forth. What I will tell you is this. My brother repaid every dollar of what the record showed had been transferred without proper authorization, plus interest. The house was removed from the estate split and transferred to me, on the grounds that I had been the primary caregiver and that my brother's misconduct had forfeited his standing to claim an equal share. His attorney avoided criminal referral for his client by negotiating terms that included the repayment. The day I got the keys, officially, legally, finally mine, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. My dad's coffee mug was still in the cabinet where I'd put it. I hadn't moved it. I don't know if I ever will. I thought about Walter Okafor, outside the courthouse that morning with his cart that kept catching on the pavement. I thought about how I'd almost walked past him. How small it would have seemed, helping some old man lift a cart over a crack in the sidewalk. How that kind of thing, just stopping when you don't have to, just helping when there's nothing in it for you, isn't something you do because you expect anything back. I thought about what he'd said in the security line. the patient ones. I'm not interested in pretending I'm at peace with all of it. My brother is still my brother. That's a complicated thing to sit with. What he did wasn't just financial. It was a sustained, deliberate choice, made over 2 years while our dad was vulnerable, while I was exhausted and running on nothing. That doesn't go away because a judge signed a document. But I'm in my father's house. My name is on the deed. And the people who bet on me staying quiet are going to have to live with how that worked out. My dad used to say that still water runs the deepest. He said it about rivers, originally. But I think he was also saying it about me. I think he knew. I've thought a lot about the kind of person my brother believed I was. He believed I was the one who would absorb everything quietly and then disappear. The one who could be handed a lease agreement for the house she grew up in. Her father not even 6 weeks in the ground, and would just fold it up and say she'd look it over. He wasn't entirely wrong about my temperament. I am quiet. I do absorb, but there's a difference between someone who can fight back and someone who's still deciding when. What my brother never understood is that the same quality that made me useful to everyone for 3 years, the ability to sit with hard things and not fall apart, is also what made me dangerous once I had a reason to use it. I think about cause and effect a lot now. Not in any mystical way, just in the plain, observable sense that actions accumulate. My brother made 9 specific decisions to move money that wasn't his. Each one felt small enough to rationalize, I imagine. Each one left a record. He counted on me being too exhausted, too grief-stricken, too busy just surviving to ever go looking. That calculus was almost correct. Almost. What he didn't factor in was that I'd spent 3 years learning my father's finances inside out. Because someone had to, because the bills didn't stop when my dad had a stroke, because the insurance company doesn't care that you're grieving. And I was the one on hold at 11 at night while my brother was home watching television. He built his plan on the assumption that my competence would never turn in his direction. That's the thing about using someone's strengths against them. It works right up until it doesn't. Walter Okafor asked me that morning, standing in the security line, why I seemed so calm. I told him I'd been preparing for a long time. What I didn't say, what I'm only now putting into words, is that the calmness wasn't confidence exactly. It was just the result of having done the work. I had the spreadsheet. I had the receipts. I had Raymond. I had Doris. I hadn't assembled those things because I was clever or strategic. I'd assembled them because I couldn't sleep and I needed to feel like I was doing something, and doing something turned out to be enough. That's the part I want to hold on to, not the outcome. Though I'm not going to pretend the outcome doesn't matter, because it does. And anyone who tells you justice is its own reward without also meaning the practical kind has probably never had to fight for a house. What I want to hold on to is the practice of it. The discipline of doing the next right thing when you're exhausted and scared and the person across from you seems so sure of himself that you start to wonder if maybe you've got it wrong. You probably don't have it wrong. Do the next right thing anyway. My dad used to say that integrity isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when you're alone at a desk at midnight with a stack of bank statements and nobody is going to know either way. I spent 3 years living that out in one direction, caring for him when it was invisible and thankless and hard. Then I spent 6 more months living it out in another direction. Both required the same thing, showing up, doing the work, not cutting corners, not giving up when it got uncomfortable. The house is mine now. Gerald's coffee mug is still in the cabinet. I'm not sure I'll ever move it. Some things you just leave where they are.